space, the pyramids, they all come out to be way over 90% probability of artificiality. But NASA never did any of those types of tests, right? They just said, don't look here, it's a trick of light and shadow. When in fact it wasn't a trick of light and shadow, and Vince DiPietro and Greg Molinar found other frame grabs where the sun was in a different reference. So,
well, that's why I said to you earlier, isn't it possible that NASA is laying all this in front of us and
probably very close to us, maybe even related to us in some way, or some lost civilization that we just don't understand that existed here on Earth, but they somehow were influencing all of the cultures around the world. So just like the idea that Atlantis, if there was an Atlantean culture, they wouldn't have been technologically advanced on one continent, they would have been a global civilization. And that's what we see, Art, is that there's an evidence by these monuments and the architecture of these monuments around the world that pinpoints a lost race or a lost civilization. And here's an actual even further detail that I've just been recently kind of pondering is when we look at some of these ancient sites, really ancient, even the ones that are just popping up. So Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the Moai heads in Rapa Nui Island, the figurines in Bada Valley, Indonesia, and even the figurines depicted by the Sumerians all have a similar style of a creature, a being that is very slender, and their civilizations are all referencing knowledge from this lost race, this lost culture that influenced all the greats that we know of now, but beyond them, we've lost.
Okay, Jason, wouldn't you think that if there was this great civilization that was on Earth at any time, that there would be more? Yes, we've got depictions on rocks and things like that. But wouldn't there be somehow preserved examples of some of the technology that you're talking about?
Well,
science is even working on the fact that information seems to get stored in particularly things subject to vibration like windows and things like that.
Yes.
So, no, that's not so far-fetched.
Well, so I think...
And by the way,
yeah.
in my opinion, as fast as technology is moving, I think that in, 10 years, let's say, a Blu-ray disc will be off somewhere with beta machines.
Right. Yeah, it'll just be a basic frisbee, and that's all you'll use this astronomical calendar based on the heavens. So the Sumerians, we think, because they're still the oldest on record, were one of the first to divide the heavens into 12 parts and assign it a constellation. So today, there seems to be a large cycle of time where we go through each one of these zodiacal symbols. It lasts about 2,000 years, where based on the alignments of where our Earth is to the sign that, the ancients had a very simple and ingenious way of knowing what age contact clock to know, and here's how they did it. If you went out early in the morning just as the sun is rising, whatever star constellation, Aquarius, Cancer, Leo, whatever constellation the sun is rising against, they would know, we're in the age of Aquarius, we're in the age of Pisces. So they went to great lengths, Art, to know exactly where they were in the cycle, because all the ancient cultures, over 30 of them, explain how this cycle affects us. And I want to kind of put it into context so the audience understands. There's 3 cycles that we're aware of as far as the Earth's movement in the heavens. The first 2 we're very aware of. The third...
Headed our way. But that doesn't mean it isn't. And that doesn't mean that a rogue planet couldn't be out there, because it could. So, what's your best guess about Planet X?
Well, I think in this last hour I'm going to try and hit it home for you, because I know a lot of people are interested in Nibiru, Planet X, especially what they hear online. And in this last hour I'm going to kind of talk about the new modern tablet view of what appears to be like the Tower of Babel, and they're ascending it, and there's two suns at the top. But many cultures were aware of the idea of us having two suns, a lot of them coming out of the ancient Vedic texts in India and such. But where does...
All right, that issue aside for a second of the second sun, although we'll come back to it, but Planet X, would you regard Planet X as essentially a rogue planet that visits on a very long orbital time, like 25,000 years, something like that?
Right. Well, I think the orbital pattern that is talked about in some of these ancient Sumerian texts is they give it a 3,600-year orbit around our sun.
Oh.
We look at the Sumerian evidence and see that they had a very advanced math system based on two numbers, 6 and 10. So the Sumerians had mathematical constructs and diagrams that showed how they were able to divide into very small numbers and very large numbers. Some of these numbers picked up into the billions. And then walk around, you create a circle. But they were the first ones to actually designate 360 degrees, and they called it a shar, which meant a complete circle. So they gave the reference of Nibiru, this Planet X, as having a shar of 3,600 years, which meant a complete orbit.
Mm-hmm. So, let's see, 3,600 years. So it would come and visit every 3,600 years, presumably at roughly the same distance from the Earth?
Yes, and I did a little mathematical calculation a while ago, and around 2003, when this was, a little bit more hyped on people listening to things on the internet or looking at webcam photos that possibly show a lens flare, interpreted it as a second sun. I did some math that showed, if our Nibiru's orbit is 36, the asteroid belt is.
Right.
Now, right between Mars and Jupiter, there's plenty of room for a large planetoid object to be passing through, and there's actually even gaps in the asteroid belt that could be considered planet-sized gaps, as if something had passed through it. And Art, I always jokingly made the reference that, we're talking about the 12th planet from the Sumerians' perspective. They called it the 12th planet, as well as Nibiru or Planet X. But if we just think of it as the 12th planet view, in that I remember Hale-Bopp very clearly. And I actually, as I mentioned, lived in Sandy descriptions. This is a large object. Anything anywhere near the inner part of the solar system, there's a pretty good likelihood that the amateur astronomers would pick that up well on its way here.
And if it made a fairly close pass, the impact on Earth?
Well, in the past, as I mentioned, the Sumerians give a very elongated tale that explain how, in the past, when Nibiru passed by, it actually caused gravitational pull on our ice sheets, our tectonic ice sheets up at the top, and just like a ice cube being dropped into a glass of water, one of our ice sheets at the top of the Earth just kind of cracked off into the ocean and instantly raised the water 300 feet or more. So, that's kind of a little disconcerting to over 30 cultures that were aware of this large cycle of time and specifically talk about two suns. Even the Sumerians have a very interesting tablet view of what appears to be like the Tower of Babel, and they're ascending it, and there's two suns at the top. But many cultures were aware of the idea of us having two suns. A lot of them, a little bit more hyped on people listening to things on the internet or looking at webcam photos that possibly show a lens flare, interpreted it as a second sun. I did some math that showed, if our solar system's been around our Earth, more importantly, for let's say 4.7 billion years, and Nibiru's orbit is 100, we get well over 1 million times Nibiru has completed an orbit through the inner part of the solar system. So it's probably likely that not every time there's an orbit, that it affects us. We could be on the complete other side of the sun when Nibiru comes into the inner part of the solar system. It might have minimal effects on us.
Well, it would change something. I mean, it would be close to something in the solar system, and so there'd be some great change every time, I would think.
And
Perhaps not on Earth, but some great change.
Right. And, I know that people can point to things, the planets heating up in various spots, Jupiter's spot and various things. Can't explain, what Nibiru's impact would be on us, but the belt is.
Right.
Now, right between Mars and Jupiter, there's plenty of room for a large planetoid object to be passing through, and there's actually even gaps in the asteroid belt that could be considered planet-sized gaps, as if something had passed through it. And Art, I always jokingly made the reference that, we're talking about the 12th planet from the Sumerians' perspective. They called it the 12th planet, as well as Nibiru or Planet X. But if we just think of it as the 12th planet passing between Mars and Jupiter, I used to make the joke that it's like MJ12, Mars, Jupiter, 12th planet. But it's probably nothing. But, Nibiru has been coming through our solar system for millions of, or at least over 1 million times. And, I know it gets escalated to the actual science level. So if there is a Planet X, we're talking something 4 to 8 times the size of Earth, going on the Sumerian descriptions. This is a large object. Anything anywhere near the inner part of the solar system, there's a pretty good likelihood that the amateur astronomers would pick that up well on its way here.
And if it made a fairly close pass, the impact on Earth?
It actually caused gravitational pull on our ice sheets, our tectonic ice sheets up at the top. And just like a ice cube being dropped into a glass of water, one of our ice sheets at the top of the Earth just kind of cracked off into the ocean and instantly raised the water 300 feet or more. So, that's kind of a little disconcerting to think about, that it has had this effect in the past. But really where I focused my attention with the whole idea of Planet X and Nibiru isn't on, it's more on the potential of reuniting with ancestors that are off planet. If Nibiru does exist, it's very possible that we actually have ancestors that live on that planet. That's
well, yes, it's pretty heavy. I don't know that we'd be happy to see them again.
Or would they be happy to see us and what we've become?
Jason, if you do the math, and I know that you're doing the math, when might we expect, let's assume it's absolutely true for a moment, Planet X, when would we expect a close pass again?
Well, Zecharia Sitchin had a specific date that's, a few hundred years from now. It's really something that's going to be difficult to pinpoint until our telescope where this planet is. Now, since the early 80s, Zecharia Sitchin met with the lead astronomer for the Naval Observatory, Dr. Robert Harrington, and compared the Nibiru model with the Naval Observatory model, which concluded pulled in a certain direction within space, but there's nothing there. There should be a large planet, but there's nothing there.
It's kind of like thinking of a pool table with all the balls on the table scattered around, and then taking the cue ball and slamming it into the middle and see what happens. And
yes.
only actually it's worse than that because of the gravitational effects. You don't even have to hit anything; you just have to get close, right?
Kind of whiz by it, right? And so, there's been this model being calculated for quite a while now that shows, there's probably something out there that's affected our orbit of the planets in the past. And now, as we look into this extrasolar Planet X, is there another large body within our system? What do? We go ahead and demote Pluto to not being a planet. I don't agree with that. But it is an interesting thought that we are now using extremely advanced telescopes. We have one out there now called the Spitzer telescope. Actually, I think it was originally called Surtiff, and it renamed it to Spitzer. So either one of those names would bring it up, Surtiff or Spitzer, if you Google it. This telescope is amazing. It's sitting out in space, and it's able to, the IRAS, Most of these other telescopes are not able to penetrate these large dust clouds, where when we start to look really deep into space, there are certain areas where there's these, dark, cloudy masses, and we can't see through them. However, these new in different solar systems, and there is a large likelihood, Art, that we will actually identify a rogue planet that fits the Nibiru model within the next 10 years that's actually viewable and trackable within our solar system. At that point, then it becomes a little more interesting to go, well, you're saying that there's this planet 48 times the size of Earth, and we're tracking its orbit, and it's going to come into the inner part of the solar system or be near us in 200 years? Interesting.
An alley. It's definitely an alley. I mean, I don't know if it'd be another great flood, or if a hunk of the planet would break off, or we assume a new orbit that ended up changing the temperature on Earth by about 100 degrees. Something awful like that is definitely possible.
It is a possibility, but there's really nothing that anyone can do at that level. If there's gonna be an LE event like deep impact, what am I gonna do to worry about it, or even
the world really should go on about their business, and telling them would only produce the ELE event probably ahead of time anyway, because everybody'd panic and go nuts.
Yeah, that's a hard one to answer. I think my personal opinion is I do think that the world has a right to know, and I do think that the powers that be financially, I don't mean the government, private equity, would take our race off planet. I know X Prize, Bronson, Bigelow, there are many people that are looking into, taking us into space. So I think in a couple hundred years, we're probably going to advance very quickly in that realm. But really, who knows? And Art, this really will go back to the topic of this lost cycle of time, in that there seems to be, again, which we're going to get into, a reason why we go into the dark ages, forget everything, and then go into this golden age and have this enlightenment. But it's very possible that there's another factor outside of just the cycle, which is catastrophic events. In the last time we were in the golden age, I calculate that there was also a cataclysmic event, meaning we're super advanced technologically and spiritually, and here comes a huge asteroid or something that wipes us all out and really makes us lose touch with this lost information. That could happen again.
To see if we have become technologically advanced enough to do something about it and get humans elsewhere to continue the human race, as it were. And maybe we just haven't quite made, one race just yet. But
I love
we're
that
advancing very quickly now. We're going very quickly now, so you never know. We might make it this time.
Well, ever since, some of these, like presidents, like Reagan, giving his speech in front of the UN, about, isn't there already an extraterrestrial presence? I think it's really interesting that the idea of like a galactic federation, Star Wars, Star Trek, some conglomerate races collaborating, if they were to look at us and see us blowing each other up, expelling natural resources, why would they want to give us more technology when we're so unstable? It seems almost like we're being nudged to make these decisions for ourselves so that we can be welcomed to this galactic table, if you will.
Maybe that's it. When we finally win the race, then we're welcomed at the table. Asteroid belt be what's left of planet X. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we're essentially talking about a collision between one of the moons of Nibiru. Researcher Dr. Thomas Van Flandern, a good friend of mine that unfortunately passed away a little while ago, and he wrote a book called The Exploded Planet Hypothesis. And, essentially when we look at all of the other planets in our system, even our moon, we see extensive fragmentation from meteorites and comets and various things. So it's very possible that there was, some type of a large, event in the past that caused a lot of these potholes and things that we see not only on our moon but on some of the other planets.
Okay. have mentioned here something about a discovery that was made, something 2,000 years old, some kind of mechanism found in 1901 by divers. What was that?
Yes, that's an excellent piece of technology that was found in, let's see, around 1901 off the coast of Antikythera, a small island near Greece there. And it's an interesting device because it's probably about 2,000 years old, and it's more complicated than a modern-day Swiss watch. It has somewhere between 35 and 70 different cogs and wheels, all intricately connected. And the Antikythera mechanism was used for two purposes. At least that's what we theorized. One was for as an astronomical device, so that as a person navigating on a ship, they could use this device to tune a logical device where it could tell you, like if you were born on a certain day, that the planet Jupiter aligns with Mars, and you know, then they would be able to give you more information about the zodiacal specificity of your birth date. But a pretty interesting piece of technology that's, you know, I like through our history is references of the power of flight. You know, they don't look like a bird. They're mislabeled as, and it wasn't just the Sumerians. Now, if it was just them, we'd be like, well, that's coincidental. But instead of a plane, or they're just not able to classify what it is. Somehow we lost that. Even, hey,
no problem, right?
You know,
Okay.
I guess that's how it is.
Well, you know, all of this is really fascinating, and there are so many people that believe this, Jason, and they believe it to the degree that they think it's about to happen again. The cycle is about to commence.
Well, let's get back on this topic of the cycle, because it's a really close thing to me that it's very esoteric to convey, but I think it's immensely important for your audience to grasp, especially people who are interested in the idea of a Nibiru and a planet X. A couple of breaks ago, we started to talk about that there's three cycles of Earth, astronomical cycles. The first two we're aware of, and the third is the kicker. So the first one is we're spinning on our axis. This simple astronomical cycle of us spinning on our axis causes day and night. Now, we don't think about it, but when it gets dark, you lose consciousness and go to sleep because of an astronomical cycle, meaning that spin of day and night changing affects us. Cycle number two is we're going around the sun. And as we go around the sun, seasons change, winter, spring, summer, fall, animals migrate. You know, there's a lot of things that happen simply because of us going around the sun. Well, there's a third cycle. All the ancients say that there's also another larger cycle, and we track it currently by calling it the precession of the equinox. And this cycle lasts 24,000 years. A lot larger. But all the ancient cultures, like the Mayans, had these intricate calendars that were tracking this large cycle of time. And they very, very clearly said that just like the first two, this third cycle has an effect on humanity. And I think that cause, or the effect, is we actually go into the dark ages and forget everything, and then go into the golden age and have this closeness with God. Now, what is causing this third cycle is the new science that I've been really latched onto and studying the last few years. There's an organization, he's a business partner of mine, a gentleman named Walter Cruttenden, and he does a conference every year called CPAC. Now, Walter has all of the great people like Dr. Schock, John Anthony West, Robert Bouval, Carmen Bolter, various hard hitters that are looking at the precession of the equinox model and starting to understand that, you know, this is something that has been affecting us